welcome to another edition of 10 Count. I am Steve Kim, joined as always by my old running mate at Max Boxing, Doug Fischer of RingTV, and the institution from the Sentinel, Ken Miller. Dave Smith not able to join us this time around. Guys, we wrap up the year 2014, coming to an end. Doug, let's go to you first. What is your most enduring image or lasting memory of boxing this past year? Well,
it was nothing that happened in the ring. It was probably the biggest industry story, and to me it was the golden divorce. Richard Schaefer leaving as CEO of Golden Boy Promotions. And I should announce right here that RingTV.com and the Ring Magazine is owned by Golden Boy Promotions. So obviously I was watching these developments with great interest, but so was the rest of the boxing world, domestically and overseas. Richard Schaefer had become one of the huge power brokers of the sport, and his stepping down from that position with Golden Boy Promotions, I mean, it made headlines everywhere, and it brought up a lot of questions on whether or not Oscar De La Hoya could reassert control, reassert reins with his own company, and whether or not De La Hoya, with just his in-house aides from Robert Diaz and Eric Gomez, the vice president's matchmakers, if they themselves could run the boxing operations without bringing somebody in. That was the big speculation, was, or are they going to hire Lou DiBella, or going to try to grab Carl Moretti from Top Rank, or grab somebody, from the business, somebody who had either been like a vice president or a boxing operations guy or a promoter in his own right to come in and handle boxing operations. And they didn't do that. And really from the middle part of the year to the end of 2014, I actually think Golden Boy and company have done quite well. They've done well without Schaefer. And the other part to that equation, without Schaefer gone, is it enabled Oscar De La Hoya to rebuild that bridge with HBO and with Bob Arum and Top Rank. So we began to see the thawing of the Cold War.
We'll get to that later. Ken, what's your most enduring image of 2014?
I've thought about it, and it's Don King. And the reason why it's Don King, here's a guy, 83 years old, one of the greatest promoters in the history of the sport of boxing. Everybody thought he was done. People had speculated that, he's no longer even promoting fighters. His fighters are on the shelf. And he shows up with what? A heavyweight champion of the world in Bermain Stavern, who defeated Chris Arreola for the WBC heavyweight championship. So we're going to go out of 14 and into 15 with arguably the greatest promoter in the history of boxing staging a heavyweight fight, and guess where else? Las Vegas in the MGM Grand, a casino that he built with Mike Tyson's money. Fantastic.
All right, my biggest memory is of 4 guys we barely saw this year, what I call the feckless foursome. Andre Ward did not fight. James Kirkland did not fight. Mikey Garcia basically went on strike against Top Rank. And then Julio Cesar Chavez basically went on strike. And I think this is an alarming trend, fighters not fighting. I think if you look at the fighters that have really made a headway in this game, guys, Gennady Golovkin, Sergey Kovalev, no matter who it is, the guys that stay active, that actually want to do the job and fight more than once or twice a year, they go places. And to me, out of sight, out of mind. And I think these guys did great damage to their career. I'm not saying that their careers are over or that they've completely ruined themselves, because a couple of victories here and there, all of a sudden everyone's back on the bandwagon. But we know this. We cover guys that fight. We might write a news brief on the latest legal briefing or the deposition they give to their lawyers, but if you don't fight, nobody gives a damn. I think that's the story for me in 2014. Doug, going back to you, Schaefer, you were not a big fan of Schaefer, were you?
No, who was? Aside from Floyd Mayweather, and maybe Al Heyman, who's like a huge Richard Schaefer guy. I mean, listen, I give Schaefer a lot of credit. He was good for boxing in some ways in that he was a very good deal maker. He did put together some huge fights, some huge money-making fights, but he was also somebody who burned a lot of bridges. And he could be an irrational person at times. And I don't think it was good. The split, Golden Boy split with HBO. I don't think his hard line against Bob Arum was any good for the sport. The Cold War was terrible for boxing. I think it turned away a lot of fans. And I know Bob Arum had his part in that dispute, but I mean, Arum has paid dues. Next to Don King, Bob Arum is like the greatest promoter
Make
ever.
sure you
He's
mention that Bob
an
Arum is number 2.
but he like Don King, he's an octogenarian. Okay, this dude has been around. We don't know how long he's gonna be around. He can be irrational. You know what I mean? I'll give him. I'll let him do that. But Schaefer, I just thought that he burned too many bridges in boxing. He was made too many ultimatums, and although for a while in 2013, he was creating, along with Al Heyman, a lot of really good in-house fights. You know, Mayweather-Canelo, huge event. Lucas Matisse versus Danny Garcia, and so forth. There was some, you know, Canelo versus Austin Trout. These were fights that fight fans were interested in and came out to support. But once they were done doing that, it wasn't good for boxing. Once you're just basically, you know, stringing along Al Heyman fighters, or just kind of building them up without matching them against each other, or without matching them against fighters from other promoters. That's never good for the sport.
You know, Ken, we talked about this earlier, though, as beat reporters. We need quotes from guys. I kind of had an appreciation for the Swiss banker. If you called him, he gave you stuff. That's one thing I think we're going to miss as media members. I don't really care if I like you or not, but if you can give me material, that is invaluable in our job, though.
Yeah, there's no question about it. Richard Schaefer was a bottom line guy. He's a Swiss banker, and he made money for Golden Boy. I mean, he made money for Golden Boy. He actually, outside of Al Heyman for the longest time, was probably the most powerful guy in the sport of boxing because of the way that he was able to just bottom line it. People forget that Oscar was on the tail end of his career when Schaefer actually joined the promotional company. This guy was selling cut pieces of Oscar trunks and parts of the ring and everything. So he was making money off of everything. But you're right, Steve. There says something about a guy who will pick up the phone and engage a reporter. And not just a specific reporter, whether it's you or myself, but anybody that calls him so that he can get a soundbite. With a lot of these guys, with Dan Raphael, in essence, to me, in my opinion, is just a PR guy for Golden Boy Promotion. Everything that came out of Golden Boy Promotion, particularly when Schaefer was there, Dan Raphael wrote it on ESPN verbatim. And so Bob Arum is another guy. You call Bob Arum, it doesn't matter where he is, he picks up the phone. Hey, you know, he doesn't even know who you are most of the time, but he acts like he does know you, and he makes you feel important. And as insignificant as we are a lot of times as reporters, we want to feel important too.
Guys, question. If Andre Ward and, let's say, Mikey Garcia had a doubleheader scheduled for, let's say, April, would the public care at this point?
They would have to be in with the best opponents of their career because they've lost so much momentum by sitting out 2014.
I don't even know who Andre Ward is. Is he a boxer? You know, I mean, look.
Decent commentator, right?
I'll say this. I've always said that no matter what the sport is, but particularly in the sport of boxing, regardless who you are, you're not going to be fighting 3, 4, 5 times a year. It's not going to happen. So what, in essence, is really important is what you do outside of the ring. And Andre Ward has really not done anything outside of the ring. The reason why Floyd is so pulverizing is because he's always doing something outside of the ring. It's bad most of the time. You know, he's on his way to court, he's in and out of jail, but he's doing something, and people are galvanized by someone that they can recognize. And most of these guys in the sport of boxing, Andre Ward, are just not recognizable outside of a boxing.
Right, with Mayweather, whether you love him or hate him, you at least give a damn.
Well,
you care enough to make a statement or watch him.
Yeah.
Whether you want to see him lose or not, Ward doesn't have that going for him. He's not polarizing.
And Chavez is lucky that his gene pool, that his father is JC Superstar. I mean, you go to the HBO ratings this year, cable, when it's all said and done, you know what the #1 highest rated fight was?
The rematch
Chavez
and Brian
Can
Vera.
you believe that? I'm basically against the club fighter.
It.
And so if he comes back, let's say he fights Carl Froch in March, which has been rumored, that fight will have some traction. The other guys, Mikey Garcia, is that classic beige spot on the beige walls from how talented he is. James Kirkland can't get out of his own way. Yeah. Andre Ward, I think, goes to show you how worthless pound-for-pound ratings are, because he might be the best fighter in the world, not named Mayweather, and nobody really cares. And I think that's the whole thing. I think he's of the belief that I could litigate myself out of a contract. And I think this is kind of sad what's happening, though. I think a lot of fighters are looking at what's going on with Heyman guys getting overpaid. not commensurate to their actual value. And I think that's a symptom of that, though. They all want to get paid a lot more, given the fact that they don't have much of a market value.
Yeah, and I'll say this about Andre Ward. He's not really had, outside of that Super Six, he doesn't have any one moment that any novice or not engaged boxing fan can point to and say, hey, I want to see that guy again. Let's be honest, even when Andre Ward is fighting, he's not a guy that you sit in front of your TV and you say, something's great's gonna happen here. Because you don't know. He's not really a very exciting fighter in the ring. So the fact that you're not an exciting fighter in the ring and you're undefeated and nobody ever sees you fight again is two recipes for disaster.
The Super Six basically crowned him as the undisputed super middleweight champ. It wasn't a tournament where it was these great
was
fights.
gone. Butte was not there. That was one of the issues. But that's 5 years ago, too.
Exactly. It started in 2009 and it ended in late 2011. That's years ago. And here's the fact of the matter. Everybody has a pound-for-pound list, and boxing is full of champions. That doesn't matter. Being a champion and being on the pound-for-pound list does not make you a star.
All right, well, that's it for this segment of 10 Count. On behalf of Ken Miller and Doug Fischer, to the next round, goodbye, everybody.